Welcome to the Jamodi podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is Jamodi, just a matter of doing it. Coaches, we are all searching for ways to better evaluate players in order to give meaningful feedback. Over 15 years ago, I put together a test called the Jamodi Skill Rating. The JSR takes players through a series of tests involving basketball skill or athleticism, giving them one rating at the end. Their JSR rating will give you clarity on what needs to be discussed with players and parents on areas they need to focus on improving. I test our players at least 4 times each year. They're able to compete against each other, past players' scores, and most importantly, their past performances. If you'd like to start testing your athletes, email me at jamodipodcast@gmail.com for more information. Coach, that's why you and I are doing this. You have great drills. I've watched a lot of them, not all of them, a lot of them, and I definitely can learn things every time. But that is, to me, that's the small part. Yeah. Like what you just talked about is the big part. And thank you for sharing your story. I really appreciate that and being vulnerable with that. And I don't want stability. That's what I thought you were, as a young kid, that's what you were craving, right? Like a lot of us crave. And these kids, my college coach, my first college coach, I had no clue who we were going to get every day. Yeah. Hard to live in that world. I don't want my high school players to, when they're done, and most of them will never play in college, to look back at grapevine faith basketball with a lack of joy or that my fear of losing was dictating everything that we do. And I think if coaches will take time to think back to the 4 or 5 biggest moments that they regret, the time that they said something that they wish they could take back, that they did not make a courageous choice with their team, all of those negatives, they usually boiled to the fear of losing. And Shawnee Harley was I've mentioned this episode a ton. She was a Canadian Olympic coach on the women's side, and now she runs Winning Matters. Okay, I was sitting across from her like this, and she talked about fear of losing, and I just felt like, golly, like that's what's been crippling me from really having this freedom with my players to enjoy the process and really change how I talk to them and how I treat them. You talked about a lot of fears, and all of those, I think the fear of losing for me is the one that, kind of crippled me in a lot of ways, from going back to even something of why not stay in that drill with that, or that game where they're smiling, having fun, and they're feeling it and they're enjoying being with each other. Why am I moving on? Because of that fear of losing.
I agree. Yeah. The one thing we've addressed that, I could share with you, my mentor, Rod Olson, has helped me with this a ton. And I worked for a guy, Tim Miles, at Nebraska, and you've heard this, but so many things that are destroying coaches or destroying programs, or even, especially in my world now, player development, is fear, worry, or doubt. They're so fearful, or they're so worried, or they're living in such doubt. And Rod Olson, he wrote a great book called The Legacy Builder. He's a Christian guy, great leadership book though. And he always talks about every player or every person you're leading, and even us, Matt and Phil Beckner, even when we get off this podcast, we will perform better or feel better if we feel safe, if we feel secure, and if we feel significant. And I just think that's the antidote for fear, worry, and doubt. It's safe, secure, significant. You're either going to live with one of those 3 or all 3 at once. But man, if we know the antidote, like that's what we should be striving for, as individuals, and even, helping our young kids get to a place where they know how to get themselves to feel safe, secure, and significant.
And we got to make sure that we don't project the way we're feeling onto our players. You've heard this before, like you can't coach what you don't possess.
Yes.
I think if you don't have safety, security, Frosty's book, Make the Big Time Where You Are, like that really helped. That book helped me with being at a smaller school. Like, I always saw Don Meyer talk about it doesn't matter where you coach, it matters why you coach. I get that, but I'm also at a super small school. Like, does this really matter? Like,
Yeah.
who cares what I'm doing here? But first of all, God does. And
Yeah.
when I'm before Him one day, it'll be, what did you do with the people that I put in your life, right in front of you? What did you do with those people? How did you influence them? How did you lead them to me? But from just a basketball standpoint, I can't coach with joy or show or demand joy from them if I don't have that every single day. And whatever the fear is that's holding me back, and I'm not discounting coaches that are in a position where, like, when it's win or you're fired.
Yeah.
I get that. That's a tough spot. And there are a lot of high school coaches in Texas and all over the country that those are the expectations. I happen to be at a school where if I disciple them the right way, obviously we can't get blasted every game. But if there's a good plan, if kids are getting
Yeah.
better and they feel like basketball is not actually the first thing, I think I could be here for a long time, even without winning state or having a ton of wins. But some of
Yeah.
those coaches are in those positions. But I do still think that the way to actually have the success is for winning to not be the thing that's driving you every single day, or not. Now, that doesn't mean a lack of excellence, but at least the fear of losing isn't what's driving you every day.
No kidding. And Matt, like it's almost like we need to jump on another podcast right now with that topic because I'm serious. It's so important. Golly, like I want to just give a few examples for you and the listeners because what you just talked about is probably maybe one of my biggest struggles professionally, worried about whether it's winning or results or money. And these are things people don't talk about enough. Like,
Mhm.
tell your players, like, yeah, I'm fearful sometimes, or yeah, I've like that vulnerability, opens up doors. And Craig Rochelle
Yeah.
said, this great leadership guy, great pastor. I just talked to a player about this after Formula Zero camp. He really shared some personal stuff with me, and he was almost embarrassed about it. Top kid in the country, great player, in tears, shared some personal stuff. And I said, like, bro, what you just displayed to me is strength. That's what that is. And Craig Rochelle said, we impress people with our strengths, but we connect with them through our weaknesses. He shared his weaknesses. And as coaches, we could alleviate some of this stress or this pressure, and that's why, like, each year, I know a lot of people do coaches mentorship groups now, or trainers want to do them. I've done one for about 3 years now, Matt, maybe 4. And we do ours during the freaking season because coaches aren't connected. They're isolated. They don't get ideas. They don't get to share stuff. So we start ours in like August or September and it goes through February. And people miss meetings, have to watch recordings. But it's because we need to talk about these fears, these insecurities, these doubts that are crushing people. And here's what I wanted to say, and what I really want to share with you and like any coach or any player struggling with this. I get to train Damian Lillard, who is one of the biggest assassins in the NBA. He will like rip your throat out, tell you about it, hit a game winner, not fearful. I'm just like, if I had half the self belief he did, I don't know where I'd be in life. I'd be some millionaire owning a building in New York. I don't know. But his self belief is crazy. So 2 years ago, we started a pro camp with him. There's 25 NBA players out there, and all the young guys wanted to ask him one thing, Matt. Guess what they wanted to ask him? They asked him, how do you hit all of these game winners? Like, how do you have that mindset? Because, they have
The
Dame
clutch
time.
factor.
Yeah. How do you have
Yeah.
that? And he said, one, he goes, I know my work is real. He knows when I look at people, I could tell, I could look in their eyes and tell whether they've worked as hard as me or not. I know how hard I train, what I really do. Some people act like they do, but they fake it. And deep down, they know they're a fraud or they know they faked it. So one, he said he could see that. But two, and here's what, like, golly, if someone would have poured this into me in the college level, I would have been such a better coach. If we could pour this into more coaches and more players now, and you could tell how fired up I'm getting to instill this in the guys I'm mentoring and leading. The second thing he said, he goes, I don't care what anybody says about me or what anybody writes about me if I miss. Matt, it was like pin drop in the room.
Yep. Yeah.
Because everyone else is fit. Well, what are they going to say if I miss? What are they going to write about me if they miss? What is it? And he said, I don't care. And because of that, he has surrendered the outcome. he makes more game winners. He's put in the work, like people have not, though. I mean, I get that. And so here's what I say, and it's part of Be Better, Be Different stuff when we talk. It's one of our separators. We have a game plan we take teams through. And then once you follow the game plan, we go through the separators. How do you separate yourself once you follow the game plan? And then now that you follow the game plan and you've separated yourself, now we have guardrails set up in our life to keep us on track. But our last separator, and this is so, and I don't know if we'd get into this, and if I'm rambling, I'm sorry. I think it's important.
Keep going, man. This is awesome.
But everyone wants to know what all these high performers do, and they're always perfect, and they always have great habits. Matt, it's such BS. They fail. They're broken. Dame struggles too. I struggle. I've worked with Giannis. I've worked with Embiid. I could name drop all day, but I'm not trying to name drop for the sense of ego or status, because level does not matter to me. High school, college, NBA. I don't care if you're a Grapevine Christian and you don't have to win any games, or if you're at Duncanville High School and if you don't win district, you're fired next year. I don't care. But here's what matters. Every individual trying to be successful at some point has gotten punched in the face, literally or figuratively. If you study boxing champions, and I've done this, they take over 300 punches a match and still win. They got punched over 300 times at minimum, and they still win. It wasn't a perfect match. A lot of them got the hell beat out of them. They got punched over and over and over. So our last separator is you could take a punch. And what we always tell these guys, and I failed at this miserably, and I'm trying to be great at it now as a leader. The people who are the most successful, they could take a punch because they're not afraid to lose. They surrendered the outcome. And we always say this, and I tell every kid this I train with now, I tell every coach, when next talk I go to Baylor, I'm going to tell the Baylor Bears this. The most dangerous guy in a fight is the one who has nothing to lose. And I always tell the guys, like I go, raise your hand if you've ever been to a bar. None of the players want to raise their hand. I'm like, some of the coaches do, like the guy you don't want to fight in a bar fight is the dude sitting over there whose truck doesn't start right half the time. He works a job he don't like. His wife or daughter don't talk to him anymore. If you pick a fight with that dude, he's probably going to whoop your butt because he has nothing to lose. He don't care anymore. And that's the same thing with Dame hitting those game winners. He's like, I don't have anything to lose. I've put in the work. I've surrendered the outcome. And you want to crush fear, worry, doubt, anxiety, pressure, comparison, distraction, all these damn things we struggle with. We got to talk about them. Number one, admit we're human. Join the mentorship group, get through it, and talk about it. And then two, surrender the damn outcome. No, we're going to have to take a punch and keep fighting. Sorry, I get passionate, man, but that stuff's
it
important.
was good. It was so good. Sometimes I forget that I'm on, a call. I'm just listening. It's so awesome, and I'm so glad that you said. I literally wrote down a team's not afraid to lose. It's such a powerful idea, but like Doug Novak talked about, his first meeting of the year with his team was, guys, what are we going to do when we lose?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So counter to what the majority of teams are going to do. Is they're undefeated to start the year, and they're talking about as if they will be undefeated and that everything that they ever wanted will come true, when the 99% is that the opposite's going to happen. Injuries, sickness, egos, chemistry issues, culture issues, culture breakers, all these things, losses are going to happen. Sometimes you just play somebody that's hot, like last year in our last playoff game. I love the team. We overachieved, and they I don't think they were afraid to lose, and we played well. We could have beat that team. They just played better.
Yeah.
Like sometimes that's going to happen. But Doug says, hey guys, how are we going to handle when we lose? The most dangerous team, the most dangerous players are the ones that aren't afraid of that. And not to go too far into that story, I can't do the finger.
Yeah.
That story with the leftovers is, Coach, we had 6 scholarship players. Coach Drew's first year, he was 32 years old. We weren't allowed to be in postseason play. Hypothetically, if we had been really good, we weren't allowed. And we knew that before going into the season. So there's no carrot dangling at all. And somewhere, Coach Drew had a huge part of it. Somewhere along the line, the 6 of us decided, guys, let's just go out and try to mess up their night. Let's just
Yeah.
go. Nobody thinks we can be competitive anyway. Let's go out there. And you know what? We're at Kansas and we're down 4 with 10 minutes left, laughing at the free throw line together. Like, can you believe it? Like, we're in this thing. We became super dangerous
Yeah.
because we had nothing to lose. That's an extreme example. So if you don't have that environment that you're in, how do you cultivate that with your team? You talk about losing. You
Yes.
talk about the fact that the sun's going to come up the next day. If we do
Absolutely.
lose this, we're still going to care about each other. My love for you as a player doesn't increase when we win, and it doesn't decrease when we lose. I think
Yeah.
that's how you maybe get there.
You have to communicate those things. And here's what, and again, learning from players, you know what it does? Like, I think it shortens losing streaks and it shortens slumps when you've already talked about it. Kevin Eastman said this. He worked with Ray Allen when he was with the Celtics, and he'd always take him, to the arena 3 hours early. Him and Ray Allen would ride in a cab. And I remember getting Kevin Eastman's blog. I still have them all saved. He'd write these really cool things. And there was one called Be There Before You Get There. And he's like, Ray Allen makes these shots because he's already been there mentally, win, lose, or draw, shooting there. So even before he gets the ball, he's already been there and played it out. And here's something, I don't want to say this to sound like we have all the answers or like we're arrogant by any means, but I swear on everything, Matt. And just like one of your questions, what makes what you guys do so different? Here's what I would say. The first thing with development and training, and you even got me fired up about your son. Like, I'd love to come do a session with him and just show you not just our drills. Like I said, I'll send you our library. But one thing we do with our players, and I worked with Oregon football, Mario Cristobal will talk about this all the time. We're going to fight for the space between their ears harder than anyone else in the country.
Hmm.
We're going to fight for that space between their ears harder than anyone else in the country. The second thing we do, and I do training these guys now, and I think 90% of trainers, player development coaches, or coaches in general are preparing them to succeed. They're preparing them to win. That's great. But if you're spending all of the time doing that, we think you're wrong. We want to prepare them to fail. So as soon as they fail and they walk in the locker room, they already have a predetermined response to that failure. They're not crushed. They're not broken. Or like Dame says, some of you guys, your foundation is so weak, you're shakable, or even heaven forbid, you're breakable. And we don't want to be shakable or breakable. So here's what I tell guys, and I swear this is so true. Like the young kid, Jacoby Walter, who played at Baylor, he's actually arrived in Portland by now. We're going to shoot in 2 hours as soon as we're off this podcast. He knows I am preparing him to be successful for the Raptors. But part of that we are going to communicate is what happens if he does not, if he misses a bunch of shots. And I go, Jacoby, I told him this right before Summer League. I said, there's going to be a chance in Summer League, but most likely during the season, you're going to go like 1 for 10 from three or like 1 for 10 from the field. Matt, you're laughing. You already know it, but like he looked at me and he's like, really? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, why? Because I'm a rookie? I go, no, because you're human, because everybody does in the NBA. Dame is a top 75 player all time. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame. He will go 2 of 10 this year. It happens. There's 80. And he's like, oh. And Matt, I swear to God, it happened in Summer League. He goes like 2 of 14. But he's like, I'm ready to bounce back. You told me it was coming. I'm getting in the gym. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to get my foundation shooting in, and I'm going to crush tomorrow. So when you say, like, are you really that different? I'm not saying we're different arrogantly, but we're going to fight for the space between their ears harder than anyone in the country. And we're not just going to prepare them to succeed. We're going to prepare them to fail because we know that's what competition does. And that's what sports does. It's going to put our back against the wall at some point, and we're not always going to be successful.
And thank you for that because I'm going to write that on my whiteboard here for kind of some ideas for the year. But and even this is my son's senior year, and there is something about that kind of closing that chapter with him. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of guys on this team and within our gym this year that every player is special. I give every player a Tuesday text for the rest of their lives, like when they come through, and so to keep that connection. But there are always some, that man, maybe they just worked their way in even a little bit more. You just had this connection with more, or maybe there was something in their life that, you felt like, okay, God, I see why you put him with me,
Yeah,
but fighting for
absolutely.
that space between, I think as coaches, if we were going to do a pie chart, at what part of the pie chart is the skill and what they can do for us on the floor, and what part of the pie chart is between their ears.
Yeah,
As far as my emphasis and the amount of questions I ask and the time I spend. And you started this whole talk off with being intentional. That was the word we started at the very beginning with your daily walk. But I think I need to be intentional with the space in between their ears, not
yes,
just throw, and that maybe we're getting into that culture word, but not just throwing a quote at the beginning of practice, reading it. Hey, that's culture for today. Let's go. Let's work on things that are really important now. But
yeah,
taking the time, whether it's with individual meetings, when you see, and you're right on the money. What's so beautiful about any sport, but maybe a sport like ours is with shooting games, with performance, you see them at their lowest points. And
yeah,
when they're there, do we just throw out a one liner to them? Or do
yeah.
we take the time to put our arm around, dig deeper? Because this is, if they think it's just about basketball, then that's our fault, right?
Agree. And there's so much to unpack in that. And I would encourage you, and I would ask you, you got my number now to encourage me, especially like middle of the season when we get tired, like be willing to invest the energy that it takes because it's so hard to just keep giving that energy to invest in that kid. And it's not always just when they fail, it's before that. One-on-one meetings and is one of the greatest motivational tools. That's Rod Olson's book. Like, are you doing it before those times? Are you taking them to eat? Are you handing them the book? One thing I do, it's old school, but like I still write handwritten notes to these guys. No one does it. I'll train a guy for a week and I'll leave and write him a handwritten note. And what hit me about that is actually a kid at Kansas 5, 6 years ago. I wrote him. I went out there. He was really, really struggling as a freshman. I wrote him a note. I had known him for a couple years. And a year later, he transferred. His mom was cleaning out his apartment. He had that note pinned on his wall, Matt. But like it takes, and Darko Rajovic, the head coach of the Raptors, I was with him in OKC. I said, Darko, why don't people do this? And his answer was simple. He just said, it's too hard. It takes too much energy.
Yeah.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the Jamodi podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.